Hey, and welcome to Bourbon Night, Real Talk with Men. Whispers tuning in tonight, and we are going to have such an amazing conversation tonight. Our topic tonight is implicit bias in law enforcement and its effect on the Black man. We have a panel of guests that are out of this world, and you don't want to miss this. Before we begin, make sure that you are liking and you make sure you share this live with anyone, any Black man that you know that has been affected by to tune in and chime in on this conversation. I promise you, they will not be disappointed. So if you're watching now, make sure you tag your friends and tell them to tag their friends to come in to Bourbon Nights Real Talk with Men, where men talk and we listen, and chime in on this chat because it's bound to be one for the books. I am Love's Passion, your clinical certified sexologist and master life coach. I specialize in women with arousal issues, and this is our panel of amazing co hosts.
Hi, I am the April Michelle, owner and operator of two multi-million-dollar companies. I am also a licensed therapist, partnering with those who are building while broken and transforming lives.
Hey, you guys, I am Dr. Tanisha Guy, your bougie therapist, the one who is building opportunities uniquely with grace, integrity, and excellence.
All right, let's introduce our guests. Our first guest we have is Detective Gomez. He has served over 12 years in law enforcement, and 10 of those years were in the metropolitan area. With over 26 years of experience in Dallas, Fort Worth Metroplex, allowed Detective Gomez to specialize in infidelity investigation. Detective Gomez is the former chief detective for the reality television hit show Cheaters. In addition to the success with Cheaters, the agency has been featured in the following: The Morning News, GQ Magazine, D Magazine, Women's Own, Fort Worth Weekly, ABC 2020, Fox 4 News, Telemundo, Al Dia, and Star Telegram. Welcome, Detective Gomez.
How's everyone
Welcome.
doing today?
We are
Great.
Well,
great.
Amazing.
Good to have you. What an
Yes.
awesome resume.
it's been a challenging 26 years, I'll say that.
Yes. um, so next we have King Charles, a brother who grew up in the trenches of South Central LA that has worked extremely hard to become a productive member of society. Welcome, King Charles. How are you this evening?
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be
Great.
here. Glad to be actually honored to be here.
Awesome. It's an honor to have you. Can't wait to hear from you.
Hello.
Also, we have next Detective Donald DJ Jones. He served on IMPD for 42 years, with most of those years being served on the streets as a patrol officer, then eventually went into detective role working with parolees. And prior to his retirement, he finished out his career in recruiting. Please welcome DJ.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be on here. Hopefully, we can all dive into this issue of some of the issues involving the Black community and law enforcement. Thanks for having me.
Thank you
Thanks,
for being
DJ.
on. Can't wait to hear from you.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and lastly, we have Brandon Morris. Brandon, would you please give us a little bit about you, a quick couple of sentences about you and your career in law enforcement?
Yes. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thank you for having me. I've been in law enforcement for 10 years now. Most recently promoted to detective, and I am in general investigation assignments in Fort Worth.
Awesome. Good to have you, Brandon. Good to
Thanks,
have you
Brandon.
back.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen, I'm going to open the floor with a question, and from there, we'll just flow with the conversation. We will take questions from the audience, whoever puts any in the chat from our audience, but we pretty much flow from there. Okay?
Sound good.
So, the first question is, in light of the George Floyd, Eric Garner, and countless other incidents in our Black and Brown communities, what suggestions would you offer for improving relations between police officers and our minority groups?
I'll go first.
Sure.
I think what officers need to do is to listen, first of all. Listen. There's one thing to arrest somebody, but when somebody's getting to a point where there's a medical condition happening, you have to listen to the person you're trying to arrest. And if they need medical condition, then you need to call the uh, uh, fire department, ambulance, whoever it may be, to get the medical attention, because that's what anytime there's a jail or there's a prison, there's always a medical staff there that's there to help the people. And at the end of the day, the prisoners are still human beings at the end of the day. So they need to be treated like human beings.
I love
I
that.
Thank you.
I agree with Detective Gomez on that. And for me, the thing is that as law enforcement officers, the main thing we have to keep in mind is that we're human beings ourselves, but we're dealing with human beings regardless of how we come in contact with them. And IMPD, Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, I just retired from there 3 weeks ago, and they had a graduating class back in April, and I saw two young Black male officers just graduated in that class that day, and I congratulated them. And one of them asked me, they said, "What's the best advice can you give young officers starting out in their career in law enforcement?" And I told both of them, I said, the main thing that you have to keep in mind is that these people are human beings, regardless of how you come in contact with them. I mean, even if you're dealing with a murder suspect, okay, you can say he's a dirtbag because he shot and killed somebody or whatever, but you still have to treat that person with dignity and respect. And at the end of the day, he's a human being just like us. And it's not up to us as law enforcement officers to cast judgment on these people. They commit any criminal act, and law enforcement gets involved. We do our part by arresting them. Once we arrest them, then they go through the legal system and go to court. They're either found guilty or they're not. And so you let the legal system deal with the crimes that they committed. But the main thing you have to keep in mind that these people are human beings, and you still have to treat them with dignity and respect, regardless of the circumstances that you come in contact them with.
Thank you, DJ.
Um,
Anybody else want to chime in?
if I may jump right in here, I would go a little bit further. I think that it should be a better vetting system hiring officers. I think that there should be a little bit more look at their mentality, their mental state coming in. What's their thought process? Because coming into a job like that, that's one of the most dangerous jobs that we have. You know what I'm saying? To being a police officer, and I commend all you guys on the show today as either ex-police officer or active detectives. But coming into that job, it's one thing. One thing about a gun, you can give a guy that's never held a gun in his life, and he could be a coward, but you put that gun in his hand, and his whole attitude changes. So therefore, the mental capacity coming in has to be strengthened or has to be intact. If it's not intact, there has to be some type of area where they can get some kind of therapy or whatever the case may be, so they can line up with the job that they're about to take. And that's coming from the guy that's just not an officer on the panel today.
Oh, okay, if I could, and I don't want to give everybody else a chance to comment as well. And I'm glad you brought that up because I've had that conversation with several people in the past, and I just don't honestly think that there's any real foolproof way to prevent people who shouldn't be law enforcement officers from becoming law enforcement officers unless you have an obvious red flag. And let me give you an example. When I came on the police department, you go through the psychological exam and all of that as part of the application process. And the psychologist would ask you questions, and since we're talking about the African American community and law enforcement, they would ask you a question about, for example, how do you feel about people of other races? Do you have issues with this type of person or that type of person? And if that individual is so set on wanting to be a police officer, oh, well, no, I don't have issues with anybody. And the old cliche, some of my best friends are black. And to me, when they say that, to me, that's a red flag because you shouldn't have to quantify the reason why you have these people as your friends. I mean, you just say, I've got friends of all different races. And so I wish that there was, but unfortunately they're not. And people slip through the cracks and you have bad apples. There was a police department in Florida, a small town in Florida, probably 6, 7 years ago. I mean, and I think like 11 officers were fired because it was found out that they were members of the KKK, and just and some high-ranking officers. One was a major, one was a captain, I think a couple lieutenants, and the rest were patrol officers. And so these people, they slipped through the crack, either that or somebody dropped the ball and let these people get hired anyway. Now, as a result of the George Floyd situation, there was a lot of suggestions on creating a database and putting officers who are on a police department and you get fired for wrongdoing, they put their name in that database because a lot of officers, they get fired from one police agency and then they go to another. And so that's another way to now that's definitely a way to try to prevent officers who are already police officers, then they get fired for whatever reason, then they just go to another police department and continue to commit some of the same acts with other agencies as well.
So I have this question, and anybody feel free to
This conversation a little
it.
earlier. I'm sorry, am I freezing?
Did I freeze?
Did I freeze?
Yes, both.
But I'm gonna keep
Am I
talking.
freezing now?
I want to touch on that psychological piece that the detective was just talking about. Detective, even in your job description and other detectives on the panel job descriptions, you are the men that's put into place. You are the thinkers. You are the guys that go out and unsolve the mysteries. So coming in to be a police officer, you said that you know what I'm saying? It's just that I can't wrap my head around that, you know what I'm saying, that they can hire and train detectives to be so intelligent, so intriguing in their positions, but they can't dig deep enough to, you know what I'm saying, with giving a person a psychological evaluation and investigate their past, social media, where they come from, who they grow up around, and all these things. Those things has to be important. They're showing up today. They're showing up today that, you just confirmed that you found out that these particular officers was part of the Ku Klux Klan. They could have found that out in the beginning.
Well, I think it makes it, social media makes it a lot easier now because people are stupid enough to post stuff on social media, and not just law enforcement. Most employers now, they look at your social media accounts, and if they see anything on there that goes against their values, their policies, their mission statement, they just won't hire you. And so I think that that you're probably starting to see the tide change a little bit in that respect. But I'm talking about in the early 90s, 80s, and stuff like that, prior to social media, when all you had to go on was just sitting down in front of a psychologist and them asking you a series of questions.
Mhm.
And it's, I mean, and if you look at it like this, if your wife confronts you with cheating and she said, well, did you cheat on me with her? What are you going to say? No, I didn't cheat on you. I mean, you're not going to say, yeah, I cheated on you. I mean, unless you just want to be a dirtbag and end up in divorce court. And so when they ask specific questions dealing with people of other races and stuff like that, and if that person is so determined to want to become a police officer, they're not, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. They're not going to hire him.
Right.
And so, but like I said, I mean, I think the tide has changed a little bit now, and I think it'll continue to with the advent of social media, because employers, including law enforcement, they do look at your social media accounts, and when they look at your social media accounts, they look for specific clues and red flags to where they say, "Whoa, wait a minute, we don't want to hire this person." And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to let others talk as well. Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, they have a physical training program for anybody that wants to come out and train to prepare for the police academy. And there was a white male, and he had a Confederate flag on his tattoo on his forearm. Somebody pointed it out. I haven't seen. He wasn't invited to come back for that because they saw that, and so it's just stuff like that that law enforcement has to pay attention to.
Brandon.
And also there is a police shortage right now also. So having a police shortage, some departments may have a guy that's borderline, but they still need bodies to fill a position and to answer calls at the end of the day. So there may be somebody on the borderline where they think may or may not be either this way or that way, but at the end of the day, they still got to answer calls. It's a public service. So they need bodies to fill those squad cars. So
what
we're going to
about,
have less people on the street. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm freezing. So what about policing their own communities to get to community versus pulling people from other states or other regions to police the community? Do you feel that would be something that may help with the numbers of bodies that need to be filled, number one, and number two, increase the respectedness of the law enforcement within that community?
Good question.
I think it's possible, but at the end of the day, like even in Dallas right now, there's a police shortage, so they're having to recruit people from out of Texas to get bodies to fill here in Dallas. Now, in some of these law enforcement guys are on the panel now. They know that people are shooting back at police officers now. Okay, so there's a chance you can die out there more now, probably in the late 80s and early 90s, but they were still shooting cops then, but now they're shooting them even more now. So you got to think, like, do I really want to be a cop here in Dallas? Maybe not. Maybe some of the listeners, I don't want to be a cop in Dallas. So they're having to recruit out in New York and California to bring police officers here. And I'm Latino. Sure, I'd like to have a Latino officer answer the call, but sometimes you got to just take what you get, and you got to hope they've been trained right and understand the rules and regulations and just what the taxpayers are paying for. And you got to hope they're doing what they're told. But, every once in a while, you're going to get a bad apple out there. That's the way I tell people, when you call 911, you're going to get a police officer that either gives a damn or he doesn't.
Exactly.
If he does care, you're going to know it. And some of them just don't care at all. They're there to answer calls and go home. They're not going to do anything extra for you. I think one came out the other day at my apartment complex. He told the lady, well, we're going to do some extra patrol out here. I said, you're never going to see that police officer again. I can tell you right now, unless he really cares. Never saw him again. And that's just the way it is, Sure, we'd love to have a Latino officer answer all the calls in the Hispanic area, but feasibly, financially, for the city of Dallas, it's probably not going to happen. Or any other big city. They got to have what they can. Because at the end of the day, the main thing what people want is when you call the police, you want a police officer in a reasonable amount of time is what you want. Somebody to answer your call for whatever problem you have. You want someone to answer your call. That's what you want. That's what you're paying for.
So when is it ever feasible for the police to police the police? So like if you're the Latina that comes to a Latina situation, wouldn't it be more advantageous for you to be the lead or point person and everyone else kind of feed off
Well, I had a situation. We talked about
other
this earlier.
police officers are are met with your experience, your life experience within
Right.
that culture?
Right. And I think it's how you approach the culture. If you approach black, white, Hispanic, Asian, doesn't matter. It's all how you approach it. But we had a situation in Dallas 20 something years ago where we had an Anglo sergeant tell these Hispanic people that they didn't turn the music down, that they were going to take their instruments. And that almost started a riot. You can't talk to people like that. What he should have done is maybe brought in a Hispanic officer and said, look, how do we approach this situation so we don't offend anybody? And then takes action. Because the music was loud. It was, on a Monday night, loud, but that's probably what he should have done. But he just said, you tell these people they don't cut music down, that we're taking their instruments, and that's it. And shut the party down now. And it's kind of how you approach it. I don't care, black, white, Hispanic, age, doesn't matter. It's how you approach the people initially is usually how the way the call is going to end. Good or bad.
That's so true. I totally get that and I understand that. Within policing, do you think it's something that's kind of a spoken, thing that, okay, well, there's, but like there's the lead agent that shows up first, or being that, okay, in that situation you were the Latina, why not say, hey, let me take the lead on this and y'all follow my lead, and it'd be a learning lesson versus a hierarchy.
Because he was my sergeant, and then it's a chain of command. It's the way it goes. The next day, actually, he asked me, do you think I handled that right? I said, no, I don't think you did, Sergeant. I'm sorry to tell you that, but I don't think you handled it the right way. But he asked me, that was the day after we almost got bricks thrown at us and everything else.
Right. But I know with everything that has happened over the last few years, there has been a lot of changes in law enforcement.
Yeah, there's
And
cameras.
one of those changes is cameras, but another change is accountability. So although we have a sergeant or we have a commander or whoever is on the scene, you're being charged now with the responsibility of being accountable for anything that happens on that scene. So now you're being put in a position where it's your job. If you're seeing someone on that scene doing something they should not be doing, it's your job to speak up, because if you don't speak up, everyone's going to be held accountable. So, and I think some of that is great. I mean, the body cameras, the accountability being held, no matter what position a person is holding, those kinds of things are all awesome things that have been put in. But even with that, there are still so many challenges and so many things that are still occurring. I mean, people have cell phones, but now you hear where some places are telling people they can only get so many feet close to the situation. But I mean, just how do people in everyday communities find out or know exactly what their rights are and what officers aren't supposed to be doing? Do they know that an officer can't say, give me your phone? You can't take a person's phone. That's a violation of their civil rights. They have every right to record or do whatever it is they need to do. How do those messages get out?
I think, you just have to stay informed. And if there's any doubt whatsoever about, especially with cell phones. And so if you feel that, well, if I'm out and about and I see a situation involving the police, I'm in public, I can record whatever. But I want to make sure I understand what my rights are as a citizen to record the police while they're doing their job. And yeah, you're going to have some police officers that tell you get back, and they might not necessarily be saying that because you're recording, but you still have to, as the police officers, you still have to have a buffer zone of, between the bystanders and the officers themselves, so you can do your job without worrying about whether these people are going to jump on you or whatever. And so, but you still have to do your job. And so that's what I mean. I just say, just stay informed, and just start learning what your rights are in any situation on a traffic stop. What the officers can and can't do on a traffic stop. If you want these people, you just want to, you see the police, oh, let me record. Just do some research and find out what your rights are as a citizen to record the police. I mean, I've never had an issue with anybody recording. And if somebody felt that I was out of pocket dealing with them, I'd say, you want me to call my sergeant to come out? I can call my sergeant, let him come out, and you can talk to him about it. And because I'm there to do my job, but I'm not going to be intimidated by not doing my job. At the same time, I would invite a citizen to talk to my supervisor if they felt that I was being out of line. I mean, that's just the way I've always was as a police officer.
Dr. Guy brought up accountability right there, and turned around and said police policing themselves or whatever the case may be. And, Dr. Guy, you remember we had right post George Floyd. We had two Fort Worth police officers on my talk radio show, and we had asked them that similar question, and they hesitated. But then again, they began to talk, and because we asked them, well, why don't you guys see this? You guys see white officers handle blacks and Latinos, and in a total different way than they handle everybody else. Why don't y'all call them on their shit, or whatever the case may be? Well, they went on and just finally came to the point to say, well, you know what, it's bigger than that, man. You know what I'm saying? That we begin to do that, you know what I'm saying? This whole organization is way bigger than that. You know what I'm saying? And then you become ousted inside the police department. So is that a big factor today? Because she said accountability, and if I'm an officer and I'm a black man and I'm out with a white officer and he does something to a brother out on the street that was just uncalled for, I need to hold him accountable for that. You know what I'm saying? And if I can't hold him personally accountable, do I go to my supervisor about that? But so, that's not really what we got from that show. Is that's not really happening because there's some backlash from that.
So, just to speak to that, talking about accountability, that I think now more than ever in today's age, there's more accountability than there ever has been, and that's not to say that we don't have work to do, because we definitely have work to do, and we still have places to go. I think there's more accountability than there ever has been. There are duty to report statutes and general orders now, to where an officer may not have been involved, but if they saw what happened and did nothing, it's just like they were. And as far as the education piece goes, it's how do people educate themselves? Most metropolitan police departments put what's called their general orders, which is the policies and procedures for their department, on the internet for everybody to see. It's not a secret. You just have to go look for it. My department definitely does that. They also put the internal affairs number on there. They also put the Office of Police Oversight Monitor on there. So there are avenues and there are ways to advocate for yourself in these situations. But definitely, I've been on many scenes. Not many, but I've been in situations where I had to step up and say, hey, look, you're wrong. That's not what we're going to do here today. That's not how this is going to work. Let's go talk to the sergeant. This is not how this is supposed to be. We are not punishment. We are not any of that. We are law enforcement.
I agree with what the Detective Brandon was saying, and because post George Floyd, Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, they adopted some of those exact policies, and they started equipping officers with body cameras. And so, the police departments are holding officers more accountable. And as a matter of fact, um, I was working downtown district patrol for a little bit, and my sergeant, he always said, if you have a resistor, whatever, everything that because you had to do your report, obviously, and everything that you put in your report, it better matches what the body camera shows. And if there's any deviation whatsoever, now you got to explain that. And so Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, they adopted a policy exactly what you were talking about, that you failure to act, and so you had to stop that officer from doing the wrong acts that they were committing, and you had to report it. And if you didn't, then you're just as bad as the officer that was doing it, and they are holding officers accountable for it.
Yeah, and the body cameras are great. I mean, I think they're fantastic because if you're doing it right, nobody can second guess you. And
Exactly.
even these guys know that prisoners lie sometimes. They say, well, this guy did this, this guy did that, this officer did this. The body camera is going to save you. So body cameras are great. Shoot all the video you want, because if you're right, you're right at the end of the day.
Indianapolis, they had a pilot program of body cameras several years ago, and I was one of the officers selected to wear one. So it was like for 60 days. At the end of that time period, we had a meeting to discuss the pros and cons, how we felt about them and stuff like that. It was a young officer said he didn't feel comfortable with a body camera because the supervisor can go on there and look at something else that you did that they weren't. And no, they only go on there to look at, if there was an allegation, they go on there specifically to look at that allegation. They just don't sit and look at body camera footage just to see if they see an officer doing something wrong. And so I did this young officer like that. I asked him, how long have you been on the department? This same department, like 3 years. At the time, I was well over 20 years. And I held up my phone. I said, you see this? Everybody out there now, this is a camera, or this is a cell phone. But everybody out there now has cell phone with cameras. The public is recording us. So why wouldn't you want a body camera so you can record what you're doing? Because otherwise they go and say, look what this officer did. And all you have is just your word on it. And a lot of people know that and it's been shown throughout the country that officers are going to lie about, certain incidents about what happened and stuff like that. And so it gives you the opportunity to know that that's not accurate, because you can go on your phone, you can edit your video. And so somebody might edit the video, not showing where you went up and spit on the officer, and that's why the officer felt like he wanted to punch the guy in the face. But all his video is showing the officer walking up, punching him in the face.
Dr. Tanisha, you were going to say something. Did you want to?
Sure, but I don't know if my screen keeps freezing or what. But
I can hear you.
Okay, my question was that you guys are all Black and brown men, and so we're talking about implicit bias. And so outside of the uniforms that you guys have worn, you're still Black and brown men. So when you think about law enforcement, there are some people that are absolutely terrified of law enforcement. And they're terrified because of what they've seen. And I remember growing up thinking that if I had a problem, if somebody was breaking into the house, I want to call 911. But now there are certain individuals who are terrified to call 911. Like, they're absolutely terrified of the police. There are parents that are teaching their young daughters and sons who are beginning to drive that if you get pulled over by the police, this is what you do. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Don't make some moves. Don't do this. Because mothers and fathers are terrified that their sons and daughters may not return home because they got stopped by the wrong police officer. So as Black and brown men who are Black and brown men, but also officers, what would you say to those individuals that are terrified of police? Because we know not all police officers are bad, but we also know there are some bad police officers. So what do you say to them, and how can they protect themselves?
So what I say, me personally, is that education is elevation and knowledge is power. So the more you educate yourself about the laws, the more you educate yourself about what you can and can't do and what the officer can and can't do, it gives you more power and more comfort. Don't get me wrong, when I'm not in uniform, I'm a 6'1", dark-skinned black man with locks, which is scary to a lot of other people. So knowledge is definitely power. Um, I tell everybody, record, know your rights, know the laws, know what you can do, know what you can't do, know what you have to do, and know what you don't have to do. But unfortunately, in our communities, that's the conversation that we have to have with our children. I have 4 children. They're all black. So it's a conversation I'm going to have with them too moving forward. And it's a sad thing, but it's reality. And if instead of fighting against reality, we fight to empower our children and our people and empower them as much as possible, giving them the laws. Podcasts like this, my particular organization, the Fort Worth Black Law Enforcement Officers Association, we do plenty of presentations on what to do inside the police, where I give a presentation on things to do and things to look out for. And I stand there and I let anybody and everybody ask me whatever question they may ask, because there's some stuff that people are just scared to ask the police, but they really want to know. So they need that voice, and we need more officers that are out here willing to have the conversation to help bridge the gap. Because you got to be able to answer the hard questions. I tell the recruits and the officers that we're the only ones in every situation that are paid to be professional. We are paid to do our job. We are paid to not use our emotions for that. So we have to continue to do that.
Can I say something? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just real quick, I would take it just a little bit further than that. I mean, when you get stopped and officers ask you for your driver's license registration, I mean, just give it to them. I mean, don't start a confrontation, don't start an argument. And I used to work an overtime traffic grant, and I was writing over 2,000 tickets a year. And I'd walk up to the car, good evening, sir, can I see your driver's license registration? Why? Well, just give me your driver's license registration, then I'll explain it to you. And then there's a back and forth. And so at some point, you get an officer that's overzealous or that's quick tempered, and now they're going to react in a negative way. And that's sometimes that's when bad things happen. And so I've always tell people, don't argue with the officers. I mean, just give them your driver's license registration. If you think that they're doing something wrong or illegal, go to the police department, file a complaint. Or if it's something that you felt that they violated your civil rights or whatever, contact an attorney and go that route. But I tell people all the time, look, I'm not going to argue with you on the side of the highway. Just give me your driver's license registration. Once you give it to me, I explain to you why I stopped you. And I'll even explain to them, okay, the reason I want to get your driver's license registration before we do anything else, I got it because I put it in my pocket. If something happens, then hopefully they check, because they're going to check you. Oh, this person's driver's license in the officer's pocket that was just shot. Maybe this person did it. And so, just give you. But for me, and I was real big on officer safety, and it was just something that I did. But I tell people all the time, don't argue, just give them your driver's license registration, and then you deal with other stuff outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I chime in on the other spectrum?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not a youngster no more, man. So I'm living today. I done been through some trauma with the police department. And I grew up. I'm from Los Angeles, and I'm an ex-gang member, and so I really was trained not to fear the police at all. Period. Point blank. And now I live differently. And I go to and from work or to and from my business or wherever the case may be. And if a highway patrol gets behind me, you know what I'm saying? I ask myself this question: Is this the day I'm gonna die? Should I have to be asking myself that question?
So the answer is to that. It's a hard fact. It's a hard pill.
Yeah, we're supposed to have those calm conversations. Let me have your driver's license. It don't go down like that. It might go down from your perspective of how you have it, but it just don't go down like that.
So I agree that it doesn't always go down like that. I agree 100%. It doesn't always go down like that. I've been on the other side. Even as a police officer, I've been on the other side. It doesn't always go down like that. You're right. That's where us as citizens, you have to know your rights. You have to know your recourses. You have to know what to do, how to act, and have that knowledge. I think that if you feel helpless in that situation, you kind of just take whatever comes your way. But when you start empowering people and you say, hey, look, every squad car has a number on it. Every squad car has a GPS in it. Every location is tracked. How fast the car was going, what turns they made, what officer was driving that car that night,
Mm-hmm.
where you were at. Gather that information. Gather the internal affairs number. If the officer's too rude to give it to you, that's okay. Gather the internal affairs number online, and then take that complaint as far as you want to take it till you feel satisfied. It's no longer the days of, oh, well, that's just what it is. You just got to take it. No, no, no. You do not have to take it. You do not have to sit by and just let it be. There are people on the inside, or on the other side, that don't want bad cops out. We don't want cops out here mistreating people because one cop in Florida may do something to mistreat one person. Now that affects negatively on everybody across the country.
Right.
We don't want that.
Yeah, let me tell you about us as society, our belief system right now. You know what I'm saying? If we do make those phone calls or do make those complaints, you know what I'm saying? Hey, it gets right into the good old boy system. You know what I'm saying? And everybody take care of it. Everybody scratching each other's back, covering up for everybody. It happens in reality. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, when we hear that that's happened to somebody and they made a complaint and nothing happened, then what's the use?
I'll tell what the use is that we have as a black and brown people for many years we just accepted what's come. We just taken it and just said, oh, they just racist. They just gonna do that. Oh, that's just how it's gonna be. No longer should that be ever. If you feel wrong, you need to follow that to the ends that you need to follow it to because you felt wrong. You take it as high as you got to take it. Most cities in this country now have oversight monitors or full civilian monitor boards for the department. Most of them, and if not, it's coming. So you don't have to just accept it. It's no longer where that you just accept it and that's just it. No, if you feel wronged by the police, you have to stand up and say something. I train my kids that you're not supposed to be afraid of no man or woman walking this earth. Nobody. Not even just because they
So,
have a uniform.
And
so isn't these thoughts? Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Is, okay, isn't these thoughts what you all are saying? Some parts of the implicit biases that we've grown up with. You know, still now teaching implicit biases with teaching them when you get pulled over by police, keep your hand at 10 and 2, just say yes sir, no sir, and be very respectful, do everything that they say. But we have the officers saying know your rights and know what you are required to do and what you can do. Aren't these parts of the implicit biases that go into building the system that we've all gone to know that has kind of gone askew in the law enforcement?
I don't know if I would call it implicit bias. I mean, I think that in today's society, like Detective Brandon was saying, you just have to know your rights. And unfortunately, as people of color, that we do have to do things differently when you get stopped by the police. And and for King Charles to go back to your response to the question, and I understand fully where you're coming from, being from LA, and I always when I have conversations about this, I always go to the Rodney King incident, and when the officers beat Rodney King almost to death, and it was recorded. It was recorded by a white man, and those officers didn't have a clue that anybody was recording it. And I like the way he handled that situation. He went to the news media with his camera footage because he didn't trust that LAPD would do the right thing. And so the news media, they talked to Chief Daryl Gates at the time and asked him about it. His response was, "Oh no, my officers would never do anything like that." Well, hold on a minute, Chief. Let me have you look at this video. And that was their downfall right there, because people in LA and all over the country been complaining about issues like that for years, for decades. And for the most part, they've always believed that several officers versus one or two people. well, we interviewed all 12 officers. All of them said the same thing. That doesn't mean all 12 of them wasn't lying or just made, decided to come up with the same story. And so that gave the people, or at least I think that gave the people of LA, okay, now we can prove that what we've been saying all along, we can prove that it happened. And that's how the video of the Rodney King incident came about. But as far as, having to, tell people, well, put your hands on the steering wheel, turn the inside light on so they can see you if it's, if it's at night and you get stopped and just stuff like that. I mean, and to me, it's more of a survival thing than anything else, because like I said earlier, I mean, you survived that conflict or that incident with that police or that traffic stop or whatever with that police officer. If there's any wrongdoing whatsoever, you're alive to go and file a complaint, and you just don't have to go to the police department. I mean, you can go to the news media. They jump all over stories like that now. And so it's not just a thing to where, if we go to the police department, they're not going to believe us, or that, they all going to put, and you can't say that, honestly can't say that all law enforcement agencies going to take, cover for this one. And I know for myself when I was a police officer, I'm not going to go to federal court, get indicted and go to federal court and lose my freedom because I'm lying about protecting this officer because he did wrongdoing. That's just the way I was when I was a police officer.
And I agree with you. And it's to take it a step further. Rodney King was the stuff that happened to Rodney King had been happening for years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was just one of the first time we saw the video. Now it's infinitely more cameras everywhere on the side of a building. Somebody that was taking a video from inside of a restaurant that you didn't see. Somebody's dash cam video. People have personal dash cams now. It's one of those things to where just because all 12 officers said the same thing, it has to be proven. Because if all of you said this, but the video says something different, all of y'all have something to answer for.
No, and that's a good example. Look at the brothers in Tennessee that targeted the young man down there, and it was a city poll camera that videotaped the whole thing. And the crazy part about it, people know there's cameras everywhere, but when they're doing no good, they don't think about. I mean, and it used to be that people go in and rob a bank, they cover their face because they knew there was a camera. Now they just don't care. They go in there. Oh, that's Tyrone from down the hood that robbed that bank. Look at him right there. I mean, and sometimes they even look up at the camera, and so they just don't care. It just doesn't enter their thought process. Well, let me make sure there's not a camera around. There's cameras everywhere. They just don't care, and that's why it's important for people to or police agencies. It was important for police agencies to adopt these body-worn camera programs, because it's either going to show the officer doing the right thing or it's going to show what the officer did was wrong. And then it's up to that police agency to hold that officer accountable when the body camera footage showed that, no, what you did, it wasn't what you put in your report, or what you told us, that was a lie because your body camera footage doesn't show that. And then any other, like Detective Brandon was saying also, if other officers are around and then they lie, I mean, they're on the hook for it as well.
I'd like to say something real quick to the young lady that said something that she was afraid to call 911 because she's afraid she's going to die. Now, that's a pretty bold statement. I think I'm afraid I'm going to die if I go to another gas station. And you could die anywhere. But I think you've got to trust the police department. And if you don't call 911 when something happens, who are you going to call? You've got to trust the police department and hope that they're trained well, hope the officers are being trained right. And if they're not being trained right, and if something's wrong, then you hold them accountable, like the detective said. File a complaint, make your voice heard. And if it doesn't go through one person, go through his sergeant, go through his lieutenant. Just pretend like you're complaining. If you go to a convenience store, you're not happy with customer service, you go to the supervisor, you go to the manager. It's the same thing in the police department. Okay, but they're just called different. You got a sergeant, you got a lieutenant, you got a captain. You go up the chain of command until you get the service you need that you want. But don't be afraid to call 911, because if we don't have rules and regulations, then what do we got? We got chaos, and we don't want chaos in our cities. So don't be afraid to call 911.
And if you don't trust your local law enforcement agencies, there's other law enforcement agencies that you can go to the state police. You go to the FBI, and I mean, at least you're not just accepting it and walking away.
So
If
I'll
you
tell
don't
you
trust
this.
the local law enforcement agency, you go to the FBI and they say, well, that's something we can't investigate, but we'll do this. But at least you didn't just say, well, I don't trust my local law enforcement agency, so I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you're sending the wrong signal that it's
Yeah.
okay to have that type of behavior.
Trust
I'll
is
tell you this: we're all working within the same system that none of us created. None of us created the system, but we're all working in it. All of us, black and brown people that are in this, even the white folks. This is not black and brown people. This is not a system that we created. But what I can tell you is what I'm seeing is that the system is banking on black and brown people giving up. They're banking on black and brown people saying, well, they ain't gonna go nowhere. I'm not gonna do nothing. They just gonna do this. I'm not gonna do nothing. And that's what it's banking on. But no, if you feel wrong, you need satisfaction. Whatever that may look like for you. Take it as high as you gotta take it to whatever board you gotta take it to whoever you gotta take it to. If you feel wrong. And if it's a situation where that officer did wrong and there was misconduct in this day and age, it's going to be addressed. Cities can no longer, they can't hide anymore. Cities can no longer just pass this over. They can no longer say, oh, that's old Johnny. We're gonna let Johnny be Johnny. No. Cities are getting hit with $1 million lawsuits because of their police department. And there are cities around this country that are separated themselves from officers because of their misconduct. So we can no longer just let it go and just say, oh, it's not going to go anywhere. No, that cannot be it. We're not living in that day and age anymore.
Um,
Rita had brought up, and I was 50 years old. The first time I ever in my life called the police on somebody. I was 50 years old, and it was 8 years ago that I called the police on somebody, and I struggled doing that. You know what I'm saying? And it all comes from my past trauma, what I went through and what I've seen and experienced. And like in the Dollar General store, and the panhandler asked me for some money, and I just told him, I said, I don't have no cash, I'm using my card. So he came back to the window with a big ball of rock. He just pointed at me, yeah, when you come out, you're gonna get this. And I would have went out there and, fought him, but I actually called 911, and I was reluctant to do that. And when I called, it was in Fort Worth actually, and I actually, when I called 911, they hemmed me up more than they hemmed him up.
Which is unfortunate. We do have just a few more minutes left, and I want to address some of the comments. And I also kind of want to ask just a last question of everyone. But some of the comments are, what's wrong with asking why when being pulled over? Asking why and arguing are two different concepts. No disrespect, but some officers get frustrated when being asked why, and that is not necessary.
No, I think I think I brought that up. So I mean, if I could, I'll address that.
Yes.
I mean, it's not a thing of them asking why. It's more of if a police officer pulls you over and then I ask you for your driver's license and registration, I don't want it to turn into a confrontation because I don't have a problem telling you why. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you why because that's the reason why I stopped you. But for me, for safety reasons, I want to get the person. If I stopped you on a traffic stop, I want to get the person's driver's license and registration. Then I have it on my possession, and it goes back because people will still give you their driver's license, ID, or whatever, and then still turn around and do something stupid to the police officer. And so I've always wanted to have that person's information on my person in case something did happen. And so it's not so much of why, but it's when I ask you, and just me as when I was a police officer, sir, can I see your driver's license registration? Why? And now they want to argue back and forth. You know, because I stopped you on traffic stop. Let me get your driver's license registration. Then I'll explain to you why I stopped you. And then they still want to go back and forth. Still, oh, okay, here you go. I mean, they still want to go back and forth. And so, and then once everything calms down, and I even explained to them the same exact thing. This is the reason why I wanted to get your driver's license registration first. And then I'll explain then. And as you saw, I explained to you why I stopped you.
Don't they have a right to ask why?
No, they have a right, but I know I'm not saying that they don't have a right to ask why. But as a police officer and I stopped you, I have a right to ask you for your driver's license registration because that's the whole reason why I stopped you was on a traffic stop. And so if I walk up to the car, you know, and I'm just standing there not asking the person, good afternoon, sir. They looking at me like I'm crazy. And so, good afternoon, sir. Could I have you drive? Could I see your driver's license registration, please? And then I'll go into, and then, you know, and everybody don't do that. But the one, oh, thank you. Okay, the reason why I stopped you is because of X, Y, and Z. And so, yeah, they have a right to ask. But I've always wanted to make sure I got their information first.
So they definitely have a right to ask why, King Charles. They definitely have a right to ask why, 100%. So I think that it's difficult for people that haven't done this job to look at it from this side of it. Because if I pull you over and you say, why did I pull you over? I say, yes, sir. You are the suspect and you didn't use your turn signal back there. Matt, please have your driver's license and insurance, please. That changes the whole dynamic of this conversation that we're having here. If I just say, hey, you know, you committed traffic violation, can I have your driver's license and insurance, please? Well, what traffic violation? Well, you committed this. Well, what that? And then it's going to be more and more and more questions. But we're talking about, we're trying to get regular people that may have committed something that they didn't even know. They were just going to work. Didn't know they didn't use their turn signal, something simple. Those are the people that we're talking about. We're trying to help those people, the people that committed a simple traffic violation, they're trying to get on about their way. And then truth be told, we're trying to get them on about their way. We don't want to sit here and take up all the time and everything they got going on. You definitely have a right to ask. 100% you have a right to ask. But you also need to understand that you may not get that answer right the very second when you ask.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So we've talked about, you know, policies, new policies that are being put in. We talked about people's rights when it comes to interacting with the police. We've talked about policing our own neighborhoods, safety on both ends. But and we talked about, you know, teaching our kids what to do when we're approached by police. But how do we get to the point where we can have the same interaction with the police as any other race, whether it be white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever it is? How do we get to the place where we're not having to teach our kids how to interact with the police? That's the overall arching, because there is implicit bias, and they're not at home at dinner teaching their kids how to interact with the police. So I'm trying to figure out, how do we get to the place where we don't have to spend our dinner time teaching our kids how to interact with people that we pay? Because yes, while we can take them to court and get money and all of that, but guess what? The tahi is the money that's being given is ours. The police aren't paying it out of their pensions or out of their pockets. It's coming out of tax dollars, which belong to me. So I'm teaching my kid and I'm paying for the abuse. How do I get to the point where I'm not doing that?
I think that slowly but surely, as a culture, we're on the way. But it's still definitely going to take time. Just because of the whole inception of police in America, we all know the beginning of that. And I think it's going to take time. It's going to take conversations like this. It's going to take empowerment of the people. knowing that you're right. In part, the citizens do pay the salary. That is what it is. Um, but we have to continue to empower our people, empower the folks that are being policed, that are there and that are entrusting these people to keep their city safe. You have to empower them and you have to give them the power and the knowledge to move forward and transcend what has always been.
Mhm. And I want to say that I think that they're looking at it from both sides. When we're looking at it aside from being racist or being hateful or discriminating, and then looking at it from the civilian side, who you have some people that just really have attitude. They don't like to be told what to do. I think all of that get in the mix, and it makes it mess it up for when it's something neutral or people being fair. April, you raised a good point on, when can our, we shouldn't have to have this discussion with our kids, especially in the Black and brown culture, about this is how you're supposed to, act when you in front of an officer or whatever. Just put your hand on your steering wheel and have your information or whatever in a plastic bag. But that is where we are, and it's sad that it's like that. I honestly think that we have to maybe change the dynamics of law enforcement too. And it's not just about enforcing the law, but I think it needs to be other things in the community that is done so people can start seeing the police differently, other than the way that they do. I think there's a lot of trauma that people experience, whether it happened to them or they saw it happen to someone else or to their culture, that they're bringing into the situation when a police officer stopped them. Fear can come off as being rude and disrespectful, just like anger come out, as being anger when you're really sad or you're really scared. We see that a lot in counseling. I think if the environment was to change or the way we perceive one another, we wouldn't get the, well, why you want this? And when the officer come, the officer wouldn't sound so aggressive or accusatory or whatever. And that starts a lot of it. I just think it's going to take a lot more when we say, get empowered, know the law. We can know the law, but the way we talk to one another is going to make the big difference. Like I can say, no, officer, you can't do this, you can't do this. And the officer saying, give me this, and not listening to me, that makes everything differently. So I was just wondering, like, if they had like an advocacy officer that wasn't there to stop a person, but was there to advocate for the officer and for the person. Like, I'm not here to whatever the law, but I'm just here to, be a witness on both sides and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there, but it is going to take changes in how we, manage police ourselves. And the police also change, when they're coming out there. But, when the officer come out, I know they're afraid, and sometimes we're afraid. I don't know. But it is more than just a discussion. It's going to take some groundwork from both ends. So I want to go to one of the questions. Nicole said, why don't the citizens just give their license and registration? Giving it to them can also change the whole dynamic. She also said, officer, ask a question first. Can I have your license and registration? Citizen, sure. Give it to them. Can I ask you why you pull me over? This can change the whole dynamic. Like Vicky stated, some people don't want to be told what to do and have a problem with authority, especially millennials. Did you guys, and Destiny just said one thing too. Let me read that real quick. Racism needs to be made a federal crime because unfortunately a lot of it stems from that. So real quick, can you guys just kind of give us your input on what was said? And I see you over there, Charles, you look like I don't know if you're biting your lip or whatever, but
Burning.
is there something you want to say before we, I would like everybody to say their last piece.
To the comment, first of all, to the comment, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, if we do this, just give them our IDs and everything like that, yada, 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 go down there and everything will go good. Yeah, but then again, you skipping over one thing. My right. I have a right to ask this officer why he stopped me in this culture right now. I need to ask that question. I need that information because I might be recording. I need that information recorded for my belief, my benefit. And then on another thing, what Vicky had brought up, and I want to thank Vicky for bringing it because it made me think about this. At some point in time, some way, some form, some fashion, the police need to get back in the community, man. Because if we knew our officers on a personal basis, a lot of stuff wouldn't happen. Because I remember when growing up down in LA, we knew certain officers. They could just get out, park their car, get out, come right up there while we have out there drinking and smoking weed, and they'll stand out there and they'll talk to us. They're not going to arrest us for that. You know what I'm saying? They just not, because, you know what I'm saying, they want some bigger crimes. They want to stop this other stuff that's going on. But we knew them. You know what I'm saying? We talked to them. Not only that, they went to the ball games, the Pop Warner ball game. They were there. They were present. Officers are not present in the community no more.
So to speak on that, that goes back to, as far as officers being present in the community, as far as officers stopping and taking the time. That goes back to the shortage of police officers, one. And then you have to, I believe, you have to have officers that have a heart for service. To me, I grew up in Stop 6 Fort Worth, and then grew up on the east side of Arlington. So when I came back to work Stop 6 Fort Worth, I used to get out and just walk and just say, hey, how you doing? How's your family? How's your mama? How's everybody? And just keep walking. And they would look at me like, what he want? And to the point where it's like, okay, that's Morris. Hey, what up, Morris? And everybody used to talk to me. Everybody used to know me. There's still people over there that know me. It takes a heart and it takes time for that. I can tell you here in my department, we're definitely building that bond to where even in the academy, the recruits are made to go on field trips to these areas that may be high crime or, you know, the dope dealers or whatever area there is. On East Rosedale and Etta, there's a tree in a park right there where there's been cats gathering for years, and they sit out there and they play dominoes and they play cards and they drink a little beer and they have a good time. They mean no harm to nobody. But if you don't get out there and you don't get out there and start talking to them and, you know, just hearing their stories, you won't know that. My department has made an effort to step towards that and to say, hey, we're going to put these recruits in this community, in this environment, before they even get out of the academy, to where it's like, hey, these are people. We've even made steps to where our tactical units, if they have to hit a house on a warrant or whatever, but there are people coming back afterwards saying, hey, look, this is why this went down. This is what was going on in your neighborhood. This is why. Just to give people an understanding. Understanding brings about calmness. It doesn't bring about, you know, agreements. It just brings about calmness. If you understand why certain things are happening, then you understand. It's not a situation where it's like, oh, they're just doing this to us. No, there's a reason. There's a rhyme behind it, and this is why.
Okay.
I agree with everything you said, and I was one of those officers. You know, and I did work late shift patrol for 28 years, and even on late shift, whatever business was open, when I hit the streets at about 10 o'clock, I'd stop in those businesses, hang out, talk to them, drive through the neighborhoods. Sometimes me and a couple other officers, we get out, we walk through the neighborhood. There was people out. They were, if they weren't, somebody probably saw us walking through the neighborhood, and I like to see that when officers are walking through the neighborhood. And so I think that's vital, and that's very important to do that. But one thing else I agree with you is that every police department in the country is shorthanded right now. And when prior to me retiring, I finished up in recruiting, and we would go to a 4-hour job recruiting fair and maybe only get 2 or 3 people that's interested, not committed to joining, but that was just even interested. And so, and I just think with the climate, and a lot of it is from our own making. When I say our, the officers who have, you know, they've done wrong, stuff like that. And so the George Floyd situation, and then that just highlighted people's fears even more. See, this is why we don't like the police the way we should, because the whole world saw that, and it just turned people off from law enforcement. And so it's just, I mean, it's just a fact that, you know, nobody wants to be the police that much anymore. And so with fewer police officers, you're not going to have as many officers. to even take a call in a timely manner, much less go to the neighborhoods and be seen. And I'm not saying that every single officer was spending time in the neighborhoods, prior to that, but and I think that made the situation even worse. And so until there's a good sound solution to deal with it, that's just the way it's going to be. I mean, it's sad, but that's the way it's going to be.
I'll say
With you.
something. I think it's true that there's a shortage of officers, and especially in the big cities, you never know if you're going to have one officer. Especially in Dallas, you might have an officer working in East Dallas that gets shipped to what they call the Oak Lawn, North Dallas area. You just never know who's going to answer the call. It'd be great if you could see the same officer every day. That's sure, maybe. Or maybe, some people in neighborhoods hire a police officer so they can see the same officer in the neighborhood every day so they get to know him. But the chance of you calling 911 and seeing the same officer answer the call every day is not very likely, just because there's such a shortage of police officers.
So I can tell you this. I've done a lot of studies within my department as far as demographics go. And when we were doing a chief's search a couple years ago, as far as successful departments throughout the country, the demographics of the department mirror the demographics of the community. In my department, out of roughly 1,800 officers, there's only roughly 160 Black officers. Only 25 of those are Black females. So if you're looking at having somebody that looks like you police the community that you look like, it's going to be harder. Because at the end of the day, with the shortages that we have in staffing, we got to put the bodies that we have where we need them. This is why I recruit so hard for Black officers. Because it makes a difference. And if you take it, it transcends being even police. You need Black lawyers. You need Black doctors. You need Black therapists. You need these Black folks in the area that show you that, hey, you can be this, you can do this, and your community needs this from you.
Well, I'm gonna say this, and we can kind of bring it to a close, But this right here is making me think that Charles, you may not like this, but I think someone like you would make a good citizen officer or whatever that partners with the police and the community to kind of go out, because I feel like you'll represent those people in the community to kind of bridge that gap or whatever, and it'll help you to have a better relationship with the police officer, and help the police officer also have a better relationship. I don't even know if they should have sports or something where people come together and do things, but I think that the police need to be seen in more likeness than just enforcing, because when you look at it from a law enforcement side, they don't want to put their life out there, and they got to deal with people with attitude. What are you trying to do with me? So I can see them, being guarded, and then a police coming to you and you're accusing me of something. And I'm just trying to make my day. I just think that sometimes we may need to, see each other in different likeness, and that'll help out, in situations like that. But we really want to thank all of you guys for coming out. And I know this is not enough time to discuss this, and it's going to take more than just talking. It's going to be a lot of things, that we need to do. And I hope that this can, encourage people to get out there in the community and start something. Charles King, you have a show, you reach a lot of people. So maybe this is something that you can start, even going to talk to the local police officers or whatever. And then, the department or whatever. And then the officers, I know DJ retired, Officer Gomez. I don't know if you're still active.
I'm a private investigator now. I'm a former police officer.
Okay. So, just different ways that we can go out and we can add, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take more than just one person doing something or one grand idea. It's just going to take us all being that idea and actually walking and doing it. But did you guys have an opportunity to share your handle so that people can know, if they have more questions, they want to reach out to you? This is a great time to share it. Would you guys like to do that real quick before we go ahead and end the show? Okay. Detective Gomez?
You can find me at detectivegomez.com. And my email's there. Contact me if you have any questions. I can help you. DetectiveGomez.com.
Okay. All right. DJ.
Unfortunately, I'm retired, and so I'm out of the law enforcement business and venturing off into something else. But I really enjoyed the show, and I think there's something that you guys maybe consider doing again later on in the year, toward the end of the year, and bring it back. I mean, I'd love to come back again, and as you can tell, I mean, I get kind of passionate when I talk about it, and I hope the other guests don't think that I was hogging the show. But I mean, it was a nice, spirited but calm conversation that we all had, and I think, well, I hope that everybody got something out of it, especially your listening audiences, and especially something that they can take away from any apprehensions or questions that they might have had when it comes to dealing with law enforcement in today's society.
Okay. Detective Brandon Mars.
I am not retired, so that's why I'm still doing this, and I'm working to advocate for my people and all people. So I don't have any handles just yet, but I'm working on building something for me and my people. Just continue on. Whenever y'all see me, I'm willing to answer whatever question it may be. It doesn't matter how hard or how strange.
Okay. And King Charles.
First of all, I want to say happy birthday, Vicky. I'm going to start
Thank
off.
you.
I also want to say, Vicky, I received what you said. And to finalize it, my handle just King Charles Production. Just Google me and just take a look around.
Okay. All right. So I challenge all of you guys. Maybe y'all can make some connections outside of here to kind of like maybe work together and let us know, and we can bring y'all back on the show, and you guys can kind of talk about some ideas that you guys have. That'll be wonderful. But we also like to thank everybody that made time to come and support us today and hear some valuable information and also share it. We are here every other Monday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern on our Instagram and on our YouTube and our Facebook page. Please share, like, comment, okay? And if you have any ideas, any topics that you would like for us to discuss, please message us, leave a comment here. If you would like to be a guest or you feel like someone would be a great guest on here, let us know too. We would love to hear from you guys. But we want to thank everybody for coming out and supporting us. And we would say to all, let's have a good bourbon night.
Thank you.
Night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.